Section 4. Qualia necessary for learning. If we return to Dennett's snake hatred example, Panksepp's account would work as follows. Rather than being irrelevant phenomena, the qualia of fear and disgust provoked by the sight of the snake would be part of the mechanism via which the primate organism mobilizes an appropriate aversive response. In other words, these unpleasant qualic feelings would stimulate the primate to flee or otherwise avoid the snake. Thus, for our protection against snakes, evolution has hardwired a connection between perception of snakes and the negative qualic experiences of fear and disgust. Note that this explanation gives the subjective qualities of qualia a bigger causal role than Dennett's dismissal of them as simply a shorthand for complex dispositions to behave. What we feel subjectively actually has effects on how we behave. We can include a thought experiment of my own devising here. Imagine two female toddlers, 3 to 5 years old. Both their fathers have a beard. One father is an exemplary parent, kind, patient, attentive, and supportive of his daughter. The other father sexually abuses his daughter. Now imagine those same two girls as young women, engaged in the process of searching for sexual partners. They are at a party when a mutual friend introduces them to an eligible young man who just happens to have a beard. The first young woman reacts with immediate attraction and interest. She engages the young man in a lively conversation and may eventually enter into a relationship with him. The second young woman, faced with the same young man, flinches on seeing his face, makes an excuse, and leaves the party without speaking to the bearded young man. The immediate and contrasting reactions of the two young women can be seen as the result of early learning. For the first, encountering beard qualia triggered happy memories of a very positive childhood relationship with her father, whereas for the other, beard qualia provoked traumatic memories of fear and pain. The crucial point here is that the energetic learning theory asserts that it is the energetic emotional responses based on previous emotional life history to the energetically experienced beard qualia which caused this difference in behavior. At the end of the 19th century, the Swiss neurologist Eduard Claparède performed an influential experiment demonstrating how the trauma of a painful event could be retained even if short-term memory was lost. His experiment involved a woman who suffered from a form of amnesia. She had all of her old memories, as well as her basic reasoning skills, but the recent past was not remembered. While Claparède treated her over a prolonged period, he greeted her every day, but each time she could not remember his face at all. Then, during one session of the experiment, Claparède hid a pin in his hand. As he reached to shake the woman's hand, he pricked her with the pin. The next day, as always, she did not remember him, but when Claparède went to shake her hand, she refused. In terms of energetic learning theory, the takeaway message is that the direct, immediate qualia of the pinprick was powerful enough to change her behavior, even though she couldn't remember the experience. Geoffrey Gray seems to meet Panksepp halfway in his own version of a functionalist account of Qualia. Although he clearly has considerable reservations about functionalism's interpretation of Qualia, Gray does make a somewhat half-hearted contribution to this type of theory. He suggests that Qualia play a crucial role in what he calls a late error detection system. This, he claims, works as follows. Cognitive systems in the brain construct a model of the external world which is used to guide behavior. In order to detect errors in behavior, the brain also operates what Gray calls a comparator system. This compares the outcomes of behavioral acts against the internal cognitive model of the world. Qualia function as markers of discrepancies between outcomes and the brain's world model. For example, consider a young child putting its hand on a hot plate of a stove, which is turned on to a high temperature. We know from neurophysiology that the child will remove its hand before he or she feels any pain. The pain qualia come later and therefore play no part in correcting this potentially very damaging behavior. What the qualia do contribute, however, according to Gray, is to decisively mark the negative outcome of this behavior, and hence to render its repetition less likely. It seems to me, however, Gray, unlike Panksepp, is ambiguous about how qualia exercise this functional role. Gray's ambiguity is, I believe, grounded in some residual allegiance to cognitivism. He says, for example, that cognitive consciousness evolved before core consciousness, i.e. the raw fields of qualia. In contrast, Panksepp specifically states that core qualic consciousness came first. Gray notes that many in the scientific and philosophical communities believe that qualia are more than straightforward qualitative perceptual raw fields. For example, quote, most views hold that qualia necessarily include also further properties like intentionality or result from special processes like feature binding. I am not convinced of the need for these surplus properties and processes, for we have seen that raw fields can be dissociated from them. These dissociations become particularly, but not uniquely, obvious when you consider the bodily senses, itches, tingles, feelings of fatigue, drowsiness, and the like. These lack intentionality just about as generally as conscious percepts of the external world possess it. End quote. Gray concludes, therefore, that raw fields are just that, quote. They can occur without any highfalutin trappings of intentionality, spatial framework, feature binding, or the like. They can similarly occur in the absence of any manipulation by so-called executive processes, attention, working memory, decision-making, and so on, which figure so prominently in the concept of the global workspace. A toothache will make its presence felt despite your best efforts to prevent it, end quote. This is very close to the position of Panksepp, who makes a clear distinction between qualia and concepts. As he explains, quote, "When you first saw the color red, you rapidly came to know all that you would ever know directly about this color. Your visual experience was not abstracted from other experiences. The raw phenomenal experience of seeing red does not require intelligence," end quote.